Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to have you with us. And it's now my privilege to be able to chair the closing session. My name is Gary Doxey. I'm one of the associate directors of the center here at the law school. And before we get started, I wanted to just draw some attention to the many people we need to thank for our experience at this symposium. First of all, I think we all notice the student volunteers. We have over 100 students who have volunteered and helped us during this symposium, and an additional 25 who have served on an executive committee to help organize the conference. I hope that you will congratulate the students and thank them when you see them. They're not all in this room, but if there are some students in this room, would they please stand and be acknowledged? Thank you for your service. We also need to thank our valiant interpreters. They have been working behind the scenes and working long hours. There have been 12 different teams of interpreters, if you can believe it, operating under the leadership of their coordinator, Baptiste Provo. We're grateful for them, and we want to acknowledge them as well. The production and technical team have worked very hard to prepare for the conference and have worked tirelessly through the conference under the leadership of Bo Bohorovich, with Vance Everett from the law school and production coordinator Luis Malaman. We'd like to thank them. As you can imagine, the list is long of the people who have helped with the conference, but we need to highlight in particular our organizing committee, which has been chaired by Professor Elizabeth Clark, assisted by Sherry Rogdy and Sandy Stevenson, with very special thanks to Deborah Wright and all of our colleagues who have arranged travel, accommodation, meals, and logistics. Thank you. We thank the Dean of the Law School, the professors and the staff who have so generously participated and allowed this event to take place in the law school, including by allowing the setup to take place in the classrooms last week while they were still trying to teach. Thank you to the law school. We want to thank also the many members of the hosting committee, including members of our International Advisory Council, a group of friends and volunteers who advise and help the center with their friendship, their advice, and their financial support. We would like members of the council and guests to stand so that we can acknowledge them, because without them, very literally, we wouldn't be able to do this conference. Finally, but not least by any means, we want to thank all of you for coming to be here with us and sharing your views and your research and your opinions and all the work that you've been doing on these topics in your home countries. Thank you for being with us. Now, after this session concludes, we ask that you head directly to the hotel. The buses will be downstairs, or the vans, that is, will be downstairs to take you to the hotel. We will meet for a wonderful dinner and entertainment, which will be held in a hall on the main floor of the hotel at 6:30 p.m. We want you to feel free to dress in casual attire. It should be a lot of fun. We will have at the dinner some important announcements regarding your luggage and your travel. We remind you that you must be checked out of the hotel before 7:30 in the morning. and you must check out, as you won't be returning to the hotel. Your luggage will be put on the bus, and the buses will leave promptly at 7:45 a.m. Now, you got at your places, or when you were coming in, you were handed a survey form. We genuinely appreciate your filling out the survey form. We know that at the end of a long conference, that's the last thing you want to do, but it helps us and is significant in evaluating how we can improve our program. We also would love to have you share any comments you have, positive and negative and in between, about not only the program but things you may have learned. We gather these together and we keep them for our records, and as I said, we consider them very carefully as we try to make improvements. The second sheet of the survey form is a list of action items that you can make for yourselves. That is, your takeaways, the things you would like to do going forward as a result of having been here with us. And you're free to, and we recommend that you detach that second sheet and just keep it with you. As you just take a few moments now to evaluate and to think, we'll be silent and just give you some time. We thank you for your time and you're welcome to keep working on that at your leisure. We would hope to be able to collect them at the end of this session. Now it's my great honor to introduce my friend and colleague, Brett G. Scharffs, who is the Rex E. Lee Professor of Law and is the director of our center, the International Center for Law and Religion Studies at Brigham Young University. You've seen Brett plenty of times during this symposium. I want you to know what stature he has as an intellectual, as a scholar, as one who thinks through complex problems and finds solutions. It will be our great privilege to hear from him now, and we'll go to that point in the program.
Dear colleagues, guests, and friends, thank you very much for being here with us for the 26th Annual International Law and Religion Symposium at BYU Law School. As I reflect back on our 3 days here together, I'm humbled by the quality and the preparation of the participation that has taken place. I'm only sorry that we weren't all able to be in each session to hear everything that everyone had to say. Some of the lessons that I have learned is that it's very important for us, and I'm grateful for you who have listened to each other so charitably and carefully. We don't come together all expecting to agree with everything that each of us says, but with the hope that we can learn from each other and leave with a heightened commitment to working together. I'm reminded of Evelina Ochab's reminder that persecution takes organization and planning. That's important, isn't it? It doesn't just happen. It takes organization and planning. And so as we think through how to respond to that, one of the things we can think about doing is being better at identifying and coaxing into a new direction those who would organize and plan persecution of others. I'm also reminded of David Briggs' invocation that we all need to be engaged in a humble search for truth. The first article I wrote as a law professor was about humility. And I have come to believe that humility rests on two primary things. The first is a proper understanding of our relationship to God and each other. That God is our Father, we are His children, and that we are brothers and sisters, which makes each of us equal and makes each of us deserving of respect and love one from another. The second thing that I think humility requires is openness, an open heart, an open spirit, an open mind, and open arms. Humility isn't thinking less of ourselves, it's thinking of ourselves less, but it is being open to learning and growing from each other. So thank you, David, for the reminder that the humble search for truth should be our shared vocation. I'm also reminded of Andrew Teal's invocation of Baroness Nicholson. Reverend Teal, I noted the same thing because I remembered it so vividly as well. Her story of the young girl sold into sexual bondage and noting that it was her dentist who was her captor and her rapist. And it's a reminder that persecution doesn't take place necessarily at a distance. Sometimes it takes place very close to home. Well, I have a little presentation I'd like to share with you that is based in part upon a presentation I made at Oxford University at the Persecution Conference this summer, and in part upon the Punta del Este Declaration on Human Dignity for Everyone, Everywhere. the Punta del Este Declaration was adopted by scholars seeking to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I've come to think of this concept, human dignity for everyone, everywhere, a lot like the favorite gift I received as a 10-year-old. For Christmas, I received a perfect object. I treasured it. I treasured it because of its many uses, its many tools, and its elegance, its quality, its construction, its craftsmanship. And just as that Swiss Army knife was a useful tool for me when I was 10, I have found that the idea of human dignity for everyone, everywhere, is a useful tool as we try to accomplish what Jan Figel, the EU Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion and Belief in Europe, has called the need for climate change. The need for climate change in human rights discourse. Our human rights discourse has become controversial, it's become politicized, it's become at times weaponized, and we need, in a way, to hit a reset button. And what we have learned is that at the time of the drafting of the UDHR, there was a cacophony of voices and different ideas of where to start and what should be included. And it was when P.C. Cheng, the Chinese delegate, reminded the drafters that the preamble to the Charter of the United Nations included human dignity and suggested starting and building upon that concept, that the process of drafting and reaching agreement became possible. And it is our hope that in our moment, 70 years later, human dignity might serve a similar purpose, one of creating a common ground, a bridge, and a way of starting conversations. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about the phenomenon of persecution. I've listed here 7 institutions, each of them which are complex and made up of many people. And I'd like to reflect upon this question. Are these institutions and the people in them the cause of persecution or the cure to persecution? The answer, I think, we'll all quickly come to see is both. It's the self-same institutions and the people who inhabit those institutions who are both the perpetrators of persecution and will be those who can prevent and end persecution. At Oxford, I was asked by Baroness Nicholson to give a case study of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a group that she sees as having traveled the journey from persecution to inclusion in significant ways, with the hope that other groups can benefit from the lessons learned, and that there are principles and insights that are transferable. So consider the state. The state was very much involved in the persecution of the Latter-day Saints. Here we have the extermination order of Governor Boggs in Missouri. Imagine the governor of the state issuing an order calling for the extermination of a people. And yet that's what it was. We also see an important Supreme Court case. Notice the title, "The Late Corporation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints versus the United States." This was a case that involved the seizure of all church property by the U.S. government. And note the fait accompli announced in the case title. We also see the seating of the first Latter-day Saint senator, Reed Smoot. There was a year of hearings held on whether it was permissible or not to seat Senator Smoot as a senator. And in a way, this event became the fulcrum point of that journey from persecution to inclusion. But the state has also been an important part of the journey to inclusion. In the 1970s, the Missouri Governor Kit Bond revoked the extermination order. We've seen the inclusion through political leaders. Until a few years ago, the senior Republican and the senior Democrat in the Senate were both Latter-day Saints. And we've seen it in Utah's efforts to find common ground between religious freedom and gay rights. What about majority faiths? One of the really unfortunate facts of persecution is that majority faiths are often perpetrators. Here we see a political cartoon from the 1870s with the Mormon Church and the Roman Church depicted as reptiles testing the limits of tolerance and the limits of religious freedom. But of course, majority faiths are also important to the story of inclusion. When we think of the Latter-day Saint journey from persecution to inclusion, much of this was made possible by friends of other faiths who stood up for, spoke out for, and defended the rights of Latter-day Saints. The Parliament of World Religions was first held in Chicago in the 1890s, and Latter-day Saints were conspicuously excluded. But a few years ago, the Parliament of World Religions was held in Salt Lake City, and the church was included as a prominent component of that. Just this year, we had a lovely outreach from the Pope, who met with the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Russell M. Nelson, at the moment of the dedication of the church's temple in Rome, announcing that they too are a welcome part of the religious landscape in that historical seat of Christianity. The media, the role of the media in fostering persecution can probably hardly be exaggerated. The perpetration of stereotypes, the unfair caricaturization, even the blasphemy is really remarkable. Consider the Broadway play, The Book of Mormon. Played for a laugh is the idea of shoving up someone's bottom, the Book of Mormon. This is hilarious. I think someday we will look back on this with shame, the way we look back at blackface entertainment or other forms of blasphemy. The church, however, responded by taking out an ad in the playbill saying, "You've seen the play? Read the book," and inviting people to send in for a free copy. We also see just subtle depictions. Look at the depiction here of Mitt Romney, who ran for president. Sure, he looks like a president, but what does Mitt Romney really believe? Notice the shifty look, the shadowy face, the black and white coloring. But the media, of course, is also one of the most powerful mechanisms for inclusion, because media, both through news and magazines, but also through fiction, film, can help us change the way we think about religious groups. What about the persecuted? The persecuted themselves can sometimes contribute to their own persecution. This is a controversial point, and I want not to be misunderstood. It's not to blame the victims. Victim is a legal term of someone who has had their rights violated. But we also know that someone whose rights have been violated can also violate the rights of someone else. So victim is not a permanent category. And it turns out that sometimes when you are subject to sustained persecution, you can become insular, you can become paranoid, you can become fearful. And we see this, for example, in the Mountain Meadows Massacre, where Latter-day Saints were the perpetrators of violence rather than the victims of violence. But the persecuted can also do things to seek inclusion. Consider missionary outreach. Consider the charitable efforts of the church through LDS Charities. Yes, of course, these can be misunderstood and misconstrued, but we shouldn't stop trying to do good because some people might misrepresent or misunderstand the good we are trying to do. And even basic outreach, trying to explain who you are. What about business? It turns out that businesses are often involved in limiting the opportunities for religious minorities. I won't go into detail on this, but business can also be a place where progress and integration becomes possible. In my understanding, it was the military and business that became the institutions where Latter-day Saint integration into mainstream American society took place first. What about neighbors? We've already seen how neighbors can be a source of persecution. And one thing I think about as a Latter-day Saint in Utah is that here I am a part of a majority. And that means I have to be thoughtful and careful about my neighbors who are not of my faith. And Latter-day Saints have this in their DNA in some sense because almost all have also lived in places where they're a tiny, tiny minority. And I think one of the things we all can benefit from doing is learning how to shift perspectives, like bifocal lenses, from what it's like to be a majority and a minority. I think if Muslims in Muslim majority countries, Catholics in Catholic majority countries, Hindu in Hindu majority countries, Orthodox Christians in Orthodox Christian countries, all were more thoughtful about their co-religionists who live as minorities in very nearby neighborhoods, we would all treat each other a little bit better. And neighbors, of course, can be a source of inclusion. This law school is engaged in a partnership right now with the NAACP. I'm proud of this because this is a community with whom our church has had misunderstanding, and to be trying to work constructively together for their being willing to work with us, for our being willing to work with them, I think is important. What about academics? If you go back and study the history of scholarly articles and books about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it is largely a wasteland of vituperative stereotypes and deliberate mischaracterization. Much of what went under the guise of academic work was thinly veiled hostility. And on the other side, there was a lot of apologetics that was also capable of distortion and oversimplification. But academics can also be part of the solution to the problem. What we see in more recent times is scholarship, both by Latter-day Saints and those not of the faith, that tries in a sustained and serious way to be fair-minded. And we as academics, those of us who are academics, can learn from these examples. And so, we could add other institutions, of course. But to me, it's so interesting that it's the very same groups and the very same people who are capable of being either the problem or the solution. And so that encourages me to consider myself and my roles as neighbor, as academic, as part of a majority faith, as part of a persecuted faith, to seek for being part of the solution rather than part of the problem. Now this leads me to the Punta del Este Declaration on Human Dignity for Everyone, Everywhere. This effort is an effort to strive to find answers to our deepest and most troubling divides. As I mentioned earlier, I've come to view this as a kind of Swiss Army knife, not as the major premise of a syllogism that answers every question, but more as a lens through which problems can be viewed and light through which problems can be addressed. The primary insight is that all of us are human beings equal in dignity and rights. There's a variety of bases for this belief. As a Christian, my belief is based upon Imago Dei, the idea that we are all created in the image of God and are all brothers and sisters. But that's not the only possible basis for understanding and being deeply committed to human dignity. There are secular, there are Buddhist, there are Hindu, there are many different philosophical, life stance, religious approaches that will lead us to human dignity. And it's not that we're seeking for a common definition. What we're seeking is common ground and also the opportunity to learn from each other about each other's conceptions of human dignity. And so this led a group of 40 scholars to Punta del Este, Uruguay last January. A few of you are here, where we spent 3 days drafting and trying to reach consensus word by word on the Punta del Este Declaration. We've included the brochure with this declaration in your registration materials. Punta del Este was chosen deliberately. It has symbolic significance. It's the easternmost point on that part of Latin America. It is a place famous for its lighthouse, a place that looks outward, a country in Latin America, which is a deeply religious continent, in a country that is very secular, perhaps the most secular country in Latin America. We wanted a place in the southern hemisphere rather than the north, not in Europe, not in the United States, so that we could encourage and welcome viewpoints other than those that are so often and loudly heard. And it was also symbolically significant because we wanted something in the Western Hemisphere, in Latin America, because we believe that Latin America has much to teach the rest of the world about religious freedom, tolerance, and inclusion. And so the Declaration on Human Dignity reaffirms the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and as Jan Figel asked, seeks a climate change with respect to human rights. There are a number of original signatories to the Declaration, about 70 in all from 40 countries, and they are included in the brochure. Since then, we have invited other academics, religious leaders, political leaders of stature to become signatories to the Punta del Este Declaration. And at the end of my presentation, some of my colleagues will hand out a sheet of paper, and if you'd like to become a signatory, you're welcome. We don't ask or expect anyone to do so, but everyone signs in their personal capacity, not in an institutional capacity, and we would simply add your name to the website that is located here, dignityforeveryone.org. This website includes the background and the text of the Declaration in a number of languages. And if any of you are interested in translating the Punta del Este Declaration into your language, we can make available a small stipend to facilitate that translation. We have it in Chinese, we have it in Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, and a few other languages, but we'd like for this to be something that is available on a global basis. The photos in the brochure are by the same photographer, and we chose them because of the way the eyes are captured in his photographs. I believe it's true, and I've heard it's true in many different languages, the expression that the eyes are the window to the soul. And here in these photographs, it's difficult to look at them without sensing the dignity of each and every human being. Since the adoption of the Punta del Este Declaration, we've been endeavoring in a variety of ways to amplify the message. This year so far, there have been a number of events in a number of places where the Punta del Este Declaration has been presented and explained, including here today at the 26th Annual Law and Religion Symposium. We have a handful of events still scheduled that will take place later this year. As I've been listening to you over the last few days, I've come up with a way of thinking about the relationship between human dignity and other important values. This is a pretty basic sketch. This is what I could come up with overnight. What I'm trying to illustrate here is a continuum from a low degree of human dignity to a very high degree of human dignity. If human dignity is recognized and respected in a society, as we increase that level of respect, we'll move from tolerance, which I think of as primarily a legal value, to respect, which is more of a political value. It doesn't really make sense to make respect a legal requirement, but it's something that we do as a matter of political choice. And finally, to a moral and religious value of love or charitable regard. Similarly, when human dignity is diminished, it's going to result in discrimination, eventually persecution, and even genocide. The arrows on top are meant to show that when human dignity is well respected, freedom of religion and belief will be a natural consequence of that. To me, the best explanation of this is found in Dignitatis Humanae, the Vatican II document on human dignity, which is the Catholic Church's doctrine of religious freedom. Today, I believe the Catholic Church is the most powerful institution on earth advocating for religious freedom. I don't think that would have been true 100 years ago. But what it suggests is that we can work within our traditions and find within those traditions resources for defending the human dignity and the rights to freedom of religion and belief of all people. I think also as human dignity is increased, concepts of equal citizenship will emerge, concepts that reject blood and soil, ethnic difference, linguistic difference, religious difference as the basis of who is and is not a citizen. And so what I would like to do is to issue a call for what we've been calling a dialogue of civilizations on human dignity. The question here is, what can we learn from each other about how to create and cultivate cultures of dignity that fit our own political, legal, social, and religious contexts? My hope is that all of us will be committed to creating cultures of dignity while realizing that what that looks like from place to place may vary in different ways. All the while understanding that we can learn from each other. Let me give you an example. When we were in Africa at the regional conference in Botswana this year, during the breakout sessions, we held a series of open session conversations that resulted in the drafting of a document, African Perspectives on Human Dignity for Everyone Everywhere. What struck me was the difference, the distinctive set of concerns and approaches that were present in Africa. Let me just mention one. A delegate from Zimbabwe said, "In my country, what it means to have dignity is to be able to earn a living sufficient to get married and support a child." That's a pretty concrete, real, significant dimension of human dignity. And I had never thought about it. But you know what? Not a week later, when I was back in the United States, I read an article about social science research in the United States saying that marriage rates are declining, and the primary reason is lack of eligible men. Men whose economic prospects are not sufficiently bright for them to be attractive marriage partners. And so what do we get? We get a lot of single mothers, a lot of fathers that are in unstable relationships with their children. And so what I came to realize is that this insight about human dignity is actually more applicable and speaks in a more real way to our situation here in the United States than I had recognized. So that's what I mean by learning from each other's conceptions of human dignity. Now, I've been recently in Indonesia, and I think Indonesia has something very important to contribute to a global conversation on human dignity. The national ideology of Pancasila, 5 elements. Every one of them, in my view, has something important to say about human dignity. China, where I was also this month, or in September, we're going to hold major conferences in China and the United States next year on civilizational discourse on human dignity and Chinese conceptions of human dignity. It turns out that classical Confucian, Taoist, and Moist thought all have important insights about human dignity that we need to project to the world. Pinghua Sun, who participated in our Punta del Este project, did a search, and he found 1,000 Chinese language articles on the topic of human dignity. And yet almost none of us know much about Chinese conceptions of human dignity. So our hope is for others of us who are not Chinese speakers to have greater access to Chinese thinking about human dignity. I've already mentioned the Africa Punta del Este complement, the African perspectives on human dignity for everyone everywhere. This document as well is on the website. And our hope is that perhaps there will be other regional perspective documents. I think the Latin American Consortium of Law and Religion Studies is planning on working on a Latin American perspective document at their next annual meeting. In India, we met a very influential Anglican pastor, Vinay Samuel, who has a beautiful I'm being rung off the podium, has a beautiful ministry with a school, an orphanage, with a health clinic, and he calls it a ministry of dignity. In India, there's a long history of the caste system, but also a long history of the critique of the caste system. And that critique is in or translatable into the language of dignity. And so, let me tell you briefly in conclusion about some of the book projects we have underway. I want to do this in case any of you are interested in lending your services to any of these projects. The first is Evelina Ochab and I are working on a declaration commentary, a line-by-line analysis of the Punta del Este Declaration that we will publish as a book. We're also working on a book on the founding figures of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the drafters, Eleanor Roosevelt, P.C. Chang, Charles Malik, etc. And what were their views specifically about human dignity? Third, Dmitry Volk, a law professor from the Ukraine, is editing a book on human dignity from judges' perspectives, and we held a conference this summer at Oxford on that topic. In addition, a book on religious perspectives on human dignity, looking at a variety of religious traditions and what they uniquely have to say about human dignity is also underway. This is being edited by a friend who is a Muslim scholar from Indonesia and a Baptist from Baylor. The next is the journey from persecution to inclusion. The first part of my presentation on the Latter-day Saint experience will be a part of that book. I've also been thinking about human dignity in specialized institutional settings. I'm not even beyond the earliest thinking on this, but think how different our prisons and our border internment camps and our refugee camps, our old folks' homes, our hospitals would look if we thought about the challenges in those institutions through the prism of human dignity. I've already mentioned the project on Chinese conceptions of human dignity. Just yesterday in our office, Professor Azan was meeting with us with the idea of having a conference next year in Malaysia on Southeast Asian perspectives on human dignity. And finally, this major overarching project of dialogue of civilizations on human dignity, creating and cultivating cultures of dignity. This is the big conference we hope to hold at Renmin University next year, and I've already heard from a few of you who are interested in participating in that. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I love this photo of an Afghan man with one eye covered, the other eye obscured. Nevertheless, we're drawn to his eye and reminded that he is our brother and that we are all children of God. As I said, we'd like to invite each of you who are delegates to become signatories to the Punta del Este Declaration. And let me mention one final project that we'll be meeting in Washington, D.C. on later this week. The brochure that you've been given has received such positive reaction that we want to expand it into a coffee table book. And it will include photos of individual human beings. It will include the text of the Punta del Este Declaration. It will include very short description of the text, an introductory material, an introduction by Jan Figel, the EU Special Envoy. We also are going to invite all of the signatories to write a paragraph of why human dignity is something they believe is important. And so we'll be sending to all of the signatories an invitation to send in 100 or 200 words. And then we want to scatter throughout this book, which we hope will become a beautiful item that we can give to each of our delegates next year here at this symposium, a commemoration and a recommitment to the concept of human dignity for everyone everywhere. Let me end as I began, with my heartfelt thanks for your being here, for your contributions to our conversation, to the many things we've learned from each other, and from the fellowship we enjoy as human beings, with all of our differences, committed together to the concept of human dignity for all people in all places. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We now have a moment to hear from several of you, and please would you come forward, those we have previously asked to present some parting thoughts and reflections about your experience here. We invite Ryosho Shoji from Japan, the Deputy Secretary General of the World Fellowship of Buddhists, to come forward, along with Muhammad Amir from New Zealand, the Mufti of New Zealand and Chairman of the Board of Islamic Scholars of New Zealand. We invite Judge Barbara Akayensu from Ghana, a judge on the Court of Appeal of her country. We also invite Nguyen Van Tan, the Director of Religion, Department of Vietnam Fatherland Front. Mujahid Aydin, the Rapporteur Judge of the Constitutional Court of Turkey. And finally, Pierre-André Dumas, the Bishop of Onsavo et Miragoâne of the Roman Catholic Church and Vice President of the Haiti Conference of Catholic Bishops. Would you please come forward and welcome them? As I mentioned, we're getting set up here, but in just a moment, we'd like to hear from each of them in the order that they're seated here on the panel. And again, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. We'll turn first to Reverend Ryosho Shoji.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ryosho Shoji, the Deputy Secretary of General of World Fellowship of Buddhists. まずはじめに、イヤホン please. Headphone please.
I'm going to speak in Japanese, so please put on your headphone, please.
Sorry. It's okay.
Maybe while we are waiting, there may be a photo or two that we could take. Number one for English.
まずはじめに
First of all,
このような素晴らしい
I would like to thank this opportunity,
シャーフ先生
Professor Scharff,
先生
Dr. Clark,
先生
Dr. Doxey,
BYU の皆様に
and all the staff and faculty at the BYU Brigham Young University.
私はブレイクアウトセッションの中でも
I was in one of the breakout session,
このシンポジウムに参加をいたしまして
and before I said that,
一
but
線で活
I
躍
was able to
司法の場で活躍
see all the people who are in the various organizations and the criminal systems and all the statistics and all the systems that are the people who are working hard to make all these facts known,
先生方の
and all these people who are working in the front field and
信
and have heard those experiences about, so that it helped me to increase the understanding that the human dignity and the human rights are the very integral part and very close to the relationship, and also the historical figure and what is happening in the current world right now, as I come to understand.
幸せを求められる
From now on,
作っていくための
in order for us to create the world in peace, we must continue on.
京都に
And
ことを伝えていきたい
I have to tell that to my Buddhist saints.
ブレイクアウトセッションの中でも
In one of the breakout
い
session,
ただきましたけれども
I said this to on the breakout session.
10年前
40 years ago,
自分の田舎の住んでいる
I was living in a small town. I was a small town boy.
松実生徒の若い開教師の皆様が来
A
て
young missionary from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
勉強しませんか
And they asked me, are you interested in learning English? Are you interested in learning Bible?
私の諸宗教対話そして国際の活動の、まあ一番のきっかけになっているのか
That
なというふうに
was probably the origin of what I become as interface relationship and how I started to engage in working with multiple different interface religions.
ビショップも
And because of I'm here because of the Bishop Mochizuki, who are in Japan.
トルコ大使館で行
And in June of this year, there was a meeting of Muslims in the Turkish
食事会に
embassy in Japan,
お邪魔をいたしまし
which
て
where I was invited to attend.
望月先生とお
And that's when I sit next to Bishop Mochizuki. And that's here I am because of that opportunity.
目の前に
In the Buddhist,
必ず原因
everything that happens in front of us have any kind of cause
私たちの想像
where we may not know the why, but it's not something just happened,
的に
but it happened for whatever the need, whatever the reason.
私がここに来させて
I'm here today because it's not just a random thing that happened, but it was meant to be.
これからも皆様と一緒に
I am looking forward
活動を
to engage in this wonderful cause,
そしてまたこの
and this symposium
続きます
will continue to prolong and for many years to come.
学生の皆さんと
I would like to thank all the volunteers and whom I was able to talk to. They're all smiling and they're really happy to talk to with me, and I see in them I see a hope in the future.
Thank you very much.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وبعد. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, first of all, I would like to thank the organizer for organizing such a wonderful event, symposium. What has struck me most, that we all who came here have the common concern that how we can make the world most livable place. We have got issues, problem, which is common for everybody. And we also agree, if a minority of any country suffers, the entire country will suffer. I would like to quote for this 14 centuries ago, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, stated that the believers like one body. If any part of the body aches, the entire body suffers and feels. Therefore, a problem anywhere, so long as God has given us sound mind and a sound understanding, we feel the pain. The universal declaration that was made by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, again 14 centuries ago, if you look at that declaration that he made, and he said that, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna rabbakum wahid, wa inna abakum wahid, ala la fadla li arabiyyin ala ajamiyyin, wa la li ajamiyyin ala arabiyyin, wa la abyada ala aswad, wa la aswada ala abyad, illa bittaqwa. The human dignity, as Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that, O people, your Lord is one, and your Father is one. No one has privilege over other. No Arab has privilege over non-Arab. Neither the non-Arab has privilege over Arab. And no white person has privilege over black person, neither the black person over white person, except through the means of piety. It is our character. And that's what God said, that, O people, we have created you from one single male and a female, and we made you into nation tribes, so you may know each other. The most righteous of you in the sight of God is the one who has the most noble character. So these universal values that we all share, whether it is in the Quran, whether it is in the Bible, or any other sacred book, but these are the values that we all share, and we all agree. And this conference that we have been going through for the last 3 days, and I'm very delighted, and I've been honored to be part of this, that we have gone through all these issues and a problem in a great detail. And I understand that this forum that was created to deliberate on and raise and deal with this issue, they have been successfully dealt with. And I can say with full confidence that 3 days that we are more educated than we were 3 days ago. And I would like to thank again for the organizers and all those people who have taken part, and they have done tireless effort in order to make this event a successful. May God reward them. Thank you.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I was asked just this afternoon to give some brief remarks on this symposium, so I quickly wrote down something. So I'll quickly go through what I have written. I wish to start by thanking Professor Brett Scharffs and the International Center for Law and Religion Studies for honoring me with an invitation to participate in this year's symposium. It is a privilege to have been invited. There is so much that I'm going to take with me from this symposium. It has been an experience. I have been struck by the warmth and the friendliness of everybody here. Everybody I have met has been so warm and so welcoming. The symposium itself has been an eye-opener. The diversity in terms of culture, faiths, and in terms of the judicial systems. It's been amazing. I will definitely recommend this program, Law and Religion, to the Judicial Training Institute in my country and also the Bar Association. there is definitely more that unites us than divides us. And this is especially true with regard to human dignity. I agree with Professor Scharffs that preventing religious persecution is a matter of humility and human decency. Our problems are embedded in our struggle to uphold the intrinsic worth of the human person. We all have to ask ourselves how we personally value each person, how we value people around us. My recommendation regarding our response to religious persecution, discrimination, and abuse is simply to be decent human beings. Education is a good response to persecution, and so is our judicial response. But it is a personal choice which no education or law will ever be able to do. That is, make us good people. Thank you.
Xin chào tất cả quý vị đại biểu.
I would like to greet all the delegation. First, the Vietnamese representative are very thankful for the professor and the Center of Religion to have invited us to participate in the last 3 days. The last 3 days we have participated of the discussion. Through those we have learned and draw experience from scholars related to freedom of religion and protecting human dignity. These are new concepts and topics help us to understand one another, share with one another with the purpose of gaining understanding and no conflict, allow us to understand among different nations and scholars in the concept of religions. And we have been talking about the freedom of religion. There are 3 areas: the freedom of religion, respecting religion, and unifying religion. It allows us the opportunity to work together. Freedom of religions and belief in the world and also in Vietnam, it raised human to a higher platform. Therefore, the freedom of religion, we cannot separate that from the other freedom that we have. We need to study freedom of religion in the context of the other aspect of the human life. We learned that freedom of religion have a deep history to it. We have learned that we can share and compare and the value of different religion. We have to have an open mind, willing to learn and willing to share. We are very happy to have the American friends. In the last 7 years, we have participated in this program. There are many friends from the American who came to Vietnam. There are delegations from the various organizations, both in the government and NGO, and we have learned. You have acknowledged the progress that Vietnam has made, not only in religion, but also on the other aspect relative to human rights in fighting against poverty, especially in the last 30 years. Second, the American visitor and scholars have came to Vietnam, have all acknowledged that there's a great improvement
tiếp cận được nhiều cái giá trị
have developed great development in human rights.
Cũng còn có những vấn đề
Even in America, there are still development need to be happening in the area of freedom of religion. And third, we should recognize that Vietnam have many progress. America has many progress, and we need to work together to exchange idea and learn.
của mỗi nước. Và cái ý thứ hai chúng tôi muốn
Another issue that I would like to mention, the practice of freedom of religion also entail of the harmonization of various religious organizations.
sự đồng thuận giữa các tôn giáo.
There have to be peaceful existence among the different religions so that they can work together.
Quốc gia
We want to have a country that prosper, peaceful, independent, freedom, and happiness. These are the common denominator of all religion that we would like to have. And we have to acknowledge and accept the differences that we have. Even though we are united, and if you don't accept the common denomination, then we cannot be united. It requires
mẫu số chung, tức là hướng tới
we have to turn toward the happiness and the peaceful life.
tôn giáo thì cũng phải có
We acknowledge that
thiết chế cụ thể để thúc đẩy sự giao lưu.
unifying religion to help each other to grow and develop,
Từ thiện xã hội.
and the strong religion have the responsibility to carry some burden of society, the need of social, the charitable activity. The churches in Vietnam, both Buddhist, Catholic, and
Chung với nhau dưới ngôi
Protestant, we have cooperation among the various religious organizations to deal with the environment, to take care of the orphan and the widower. It requires the understanding of one another's strength and weakness to support each other.
tôn giáo đều đi qua thăm, có lãnh đạo các tôn giáo đi thăm chúc
We have religious leader from one organization to participate in another religious organization celebration, so that there is an exchange of courtesies and of kindness and of understanding.
rồi trong các hoạt động chung như vậy.
In those common share of activity,
Chúc mừng động thổ các xây dựng các
the Buddhist leader also go to the Catholic Church to participate in their celebration. When we recognize that there are a certain religion that need help, the other religion step in to provide support, and we consider that is a critical element of harmonious religious activity.
giáo như vậy là sẽ kết nghĩa anh em với nhau.
It's a friendships and brotherhood that exists in Vietnam.
Chúng tôi thúc đẩy các hoạt động giao lưu.
We have promoting activity of sports of various type,
Bơi lội này giữa các
and swimming and badminton and so forth. We creating the opportunity for competitions, for musical program, and culture program. Also in meditations and in chanting the sutra, this activity allow each other to be comfortable and familiar with each other practice.
hỗ trợ giữa các tôn giáo, chia sẻ kinh nghiệm cho bên
Both Buddhist, Catholic supporting Buddhist, Buddhist supporting Taoist, and also to support in the healthcare needs in the country.
và có một nội dung thứ ba chúng tôi muốn nhấn mạnh.
The third item is to increasing the unifications of religion. We have creating periodically review and meeting so that the leader work together with the Father Front. We're creating periodic review and meetings so that we can work together so that issue do not get pushed aside, but actively addressed. Every 6 months or every year, we meet together, all the religious leaders, to hear idea and recommendation that the Fatherland's Front can come up to resolution for those minor conflicts that beginning to show up. Through those communication, we can develop a uniform mean of operating among the different religions. The last thing I would like to mention is to each country should have a mean to bring the religion together within your country. And I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity.
Bonsoir à vous tous.
Hello to all. I'm going to speak in, after the Vietnamese, we're going to speak in French. Thank you to you all for having invited me to the symposium. It was for me a huge pleasure to spend these days, wonderful days. I thank the Church of Jesus Christ, and I thank the community, the International Law and Religions Center, and all those that have spoken. It was for me more than an event. It was 3 days of blessings and grace. I discovered many things and I learned many things, and I found joy, beauty, humility, and the kindness and the tenderness of love that is in our brothers and sisters of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I can say during the symposium that I was close to a source that we found new energies from, and to have the strength to be able to continue my road. I can also say that it's from a new thing in my life, a new Pentecost. And one of the recommendations that I would like to make, you should invite more Catholic bishops. I saw and I experienced catharsis. It's a purification. The catharsis is inside of me, catharsis inside of me that teaches me, invites me to purify my heart, my mind, what I'm looking at as well, my sight, my spirituality, my humanity, the way that I need to purify also my way of speaking and my language, my commitments, my action and my perspectives for the future. I've learned this morning through the mouth of someone that talked that wasn't a believer, that at the beginning said that she was going to bring this lady a vision, a secular vision of things. And yet she told us, I'm asking you to pray for me. And someone in the assembly said, you asked me to pray for you. What God should I pray to? And as she was talking about charity, the person said to her, I have a lot of charity and love for you. I started already praying for you.
cette personne à la fin a pris la
And the person at the end said,
religion pure, comme
pure religion, as James said, is the religion where we take care of those that are vulnerable, the most poor and those that are put aside. I understood that the pure religion is the religion that gives a lot of love and charity. I'm going to finish soon. But I would like to say that I discovered that the freedom of religion is not a theory. The freedom of religion is to live with more love, receiving the love of God and sharing that love with others. I discovered that dignity is not only an end of its own, but the dignity is to be living with more love. And I remember what Savior Jesus, Lord Jesus said. It's by the sign of love that we will recognize that you are my disciples. If you have love one for another. So I would conclude by saying, where there is love and charity, God is present. And my final conclusion with Tolstoy is love will save our world. Thank you for having shown me this love.
Wow, I'm the last one in the last session. I feel like a hero or a victim, more like. But I have some notes, 2-page long. I hope you will bear with me, but I will stop if I see the stop sign, don't worry. First of all, I would like to thank for excellent organization of the symposium and other social activities to all who made it possible or contributed. I particularly enjoyed the diverse background of participants who are scholars, journalists, officials, judges, and religious leaders from all around the world. I would like to join to the General Counsel, Mr. John Oz, in his comments that it would not hurt to have a Muslim voice or more diverse voices in the plenary sessions, obviously in the opening sessions as well. Throughout the conference, I heard about many tragedies and atrocities taking place all around the world, which I was not aware of. The symposium certainly served to raise my self-awareness and attentiveness on such issues, but it was also interesting to hear that the real reason or cause of these atrocities may not always be the religion, although it looks like it, but it may be the political or ethnicity issues. I serve in judiciary in Turkey, so I very much agree that there is a strong link between the independent judiciary and the religious freedom. So I am glad this issue was touched upon in the symposium. Also, it was very interesting to learn that how major role plays the registration laws as an obstacle before the religious freedoms. And it was very exciting to listen to Justice Giuliani regarding his impeachment process and how they resisted it as a court. At some point, they were even taken under the house arrest and their phone lines were cut off. That was pretty interesting, but fortunately, they made it through and succeeded. The last note about the structure of the symposium. As a judge, rapporteur judge, I was assigned with other judges in judicial sessions as a panelist. So during 2 days, I have attended 5 sessions as a panelist. I think judges would enjoy a little bit more flexibility and to be able to go to other breakout sessions and to listen to as a listener and to interact with other people. We have been very good friends now with all judges as panelists in the forum. But of course, Judge Campbell made an excellent job moderating our judicial sessions. I would like to thank for that. He looked like He was carefully listening to me all along. I am not sure if he was acting or he was really listening, but I think he was, so thank you for that too. And one last thing, I hope the presentation made here will be shared with us, a collection of them through email or with other means. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Now, as we conclude, we invite our panelists to take their seats in the audience, and thank you for your wonderful comments. We do appreciate them. Thank you. For our final comments, commentaries, and thoughts, we invite Professor Cole Durham, who is an emeritus professor of law at this law school and the founding director of the center, to come forward and share a few concluding thoughts, along with Elizabeth Clark, Professor Elizabeth Clark, who has been the organizing chair of this wonderful symposium. Thank you. Let me just make one housekeeping announcement. When we finish, please leave your headsets or take them out and turn them back in. Do not put them in your bags. Thank you very much.
Well, let me begin with one note of sadness. We just received word that Sterling Colton has just passed away. I was able to, he is my mother's first cousin. That's probably the most significant role he's had in my life, but he's the former general counsel of the Marriott Corporation, former president of the Washington Temple of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and has been from the beginning one of the key advisors to me and others in building and creating the center. So we extend our sympathy to the family. Phil and Bobby have been here. I think Phil is there. Yeah, Phil now is the youngest, the only remaining person in his generation of the family. So we extend our sympathy, and they will be missed. We have a chair that's a strange chair that no one sits in with the center, that's funded in honor of Sterling and Ellie Colton, and I know they resisted having their name on this, but we convinced them that there were so many people who loved and honored them that this would be much more helpful if they put their name on it. So we're sad to see that happen, but these things are part of life. We had hoped that this symposium would be the inauguration of our new courtroom, moot courtroom, here at the law school. But as you can tell, construction was not finished on time. Instead, the setting is one of reconstruction. We have some beautiful, well, not so beautiful drapes covering the walls, and the main elevator is not working, hasn't been for several months. My trainer is very happy about this because I'm on the 5th floor. This gives all of us some extra exercise, and particularly those of us who have offices on the 5th floor. But perhaps this is fitting. As I reflect back on the conference, reconstruction has been a major theme. Our time together reminded us of the need for reconstruction of our ideas, our strategies, our networks, and our overall efforts to participate in the reconstruction of our world. Our sessions have helped heighten our awareness of the gravity of the problems we face. We started with the brutally detailed litany of oppression narrated by Lord Alton, which was supplemented by reports in many of the sessions. We have been reminded of the recurring tragedies that Reverend Teal called savage suppression of religious freedom. We have had insights from the judiciary, from media experts, from country experts, and from everyone here. We have been reinitiated in how much needs to be reconstructed. Some basic structures are in place. The ideal of religious freedom or belief is widely recognized in international human rights instruments and in the constitutions of the world. But as Roger Finke pointed out, there is a chasm that separates promise from practice. The structures are aging, and the importance of the supporting pillars of these structures is increasingly forgotten as other new issues crowd to the forefront of popular attention. Increasingly, we are seeing suspicion that what has long been cherished as a first and foundational freedom, it's now more suspect. The fact that religion is sometimes inappropriately used as drapery masking bigotry does not justify dismantling the religious freedom structures that have been the best antidote to discrimination this world has ever known. Sometimes religious groups contribute to growing suspicions by claiming protection for their own rights without respecting the rights of others, and I think one of the important things that has been demonstrated again and again here is that we need to demonstrate that we care as much for the rights of others as for the rights that we claim for ourselves. Any efforts of reconstruction will face the turbulent intellectual currents of our time. Leonidas Machado walked us through a remarkable overview of the winds blowing from many directions that in some cases may help our reconstructive efforts, but too often contribute more to their erosion or to the erosion of our religious freedom rights. For these and many other reasons, we are living at a time that calls for reconstruction. This does not mean creating something new. It means strengthening, shoring up, adapting to new challenges, and polishing this first freedom so that it can, in Madison's words, become the luster of our countries. Let me make mention just of a few reconstructive efforts that have been discussed in our time together. First, I agree with World Evangelical Alliance Secretary General Ephraim Tendero that we need constructive collaboration for religious freedom. That is one of the major objectives of this symposium over many years, not merely to bring a group like this together, but to form an ever-growing network of people who are committed and understand the importance of these issues and can carry them out in their parts of the world. This collaboration needs to involve the collaborative framework of government, business, the education sector, academics, civil society, and so forth. It needs to involve religious leaders. I would add diplomats, both formal and informal, who address the challenges of our time with civility. Second, as Professor Scharffs has emphasized, we have joined a global project on re-emphasizing the significance of dignity. We have listened to increasingly strident discourses in which rights to freedom of religion or belief are seen as colliding with other rights, whether it be LGBT groups, women's issues, secularist viewpoints, and we could name others. Our sense has been that the need for reconstruction calls upon us to go back to foundations, looking at deep resources associated with the idea of dignity and similar foundational thinking in various religious traditions. This will provide the resources we need to undertake the deep reconstruction that lies ahead. Third, in our reconstructive collaboration, we need to make freedom of religion or belief a priority. This is sometimes criticized as a move to demote other rights. That is not the case and certainly not the intention. In fact, while freedom of religion or belief is the grandparent of other rights, it is too often a forgotten and neglected grandparent and deserves a bit of elevation. As a practical matter, it is often a back burner right, with other issues claiming priority because of their urgency. If a religious freedom is one of the issues in the portfolio of a human rights worker in a government office, it is almost inevitable that it will slip down the priority list. That is one of the reasons in this country and now in many others, efforts have been made to assign someone, in our case, the Ambassador at Large's office, the U.S. Commission of International and Religious Freedom, to assign them responsibility to make sure this priority is not forgotten. Because there's a risk that if this remains, it is in some ways a back burner issue. It's less urgent than disappearances, than torture, than genocide, than other really critical things that are happening. But if you let it sit on the back burner and don't pay attention to it, it boils over. And then it floods the world with refugees, with displaced persons, with people suffering all kinds of other problems, as we've talked about here. Fourth, many of your contributions have exemplified the fact that our reconstruction can bring new insight and creativity to age-old problems. Evelina Ochab talked about the fact if you see doors, knock on them. I think if you don't see them, go a little further and find some doors. She is a model to us of what one committed and creative individual can do. Starting on her own, but tapping many networks, she succeeded in getting the United Nations to establish the UN International Day commemorating the victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief, which is now celebrated on August 22nd. We hope many of you here will emulate that kind of example, and that's why we gave you a few minutes to write down what you think are some things you could do. And you can do them with creativity and great flair. Maybe it's just sort of boring thing to do, but do it, because this is how the world gets changed. I think we need, in this effort, to watch out for things, dangers that may be coming. The New Zealander who got prayed over in that session was a secular voice warning of what's happening as the idea of advancing religion is being attacked as a sort of key basis for charitable treatment in the laws of many countries. So those are kinds of things that can be coming that we need to be watching for and working on. Fifth point, we need to contribute to the cure of what Alberto Maloney, in a session that many of you did not attend, called religious Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is something I worry about as I note my inability to remember names, so I hope you'll forgive me. But he is convinced that many of our problems flow from the fact that we no longer remember the treasures of our own religious traditions, and that many of the evils associated with religious extremism could be solved if we would return to our roots in our different traditions, engage in the excavation that is critical to reconstruction, and then find new pathways forward. Tura Lindholm, in a way, gave an example of that, talking about how Buddhists in Myanmar could benefit from being reminded of the teachings of Ashoka. The wheel of Ashoka is all over in Buddha in Myanmar, but the teaching that it's really important to respect the religious views of others, that could be revitalized, and that would be an example. The important secret, of course, in this recipe of avoiding Alzheimer's in religious traditions is that revitalization and reconstruction must come from within. It cannot be imposed from outside. As discouraging as our times sometimes seem, and as formidable as challenges no doubt are, we need to remember that, in fact, part of religion's resiliency is that it is one of the most innovative and adaptive of human institutions. In an important essay, Professor Stephen Smith from the University of San Diego has pointed out that religious communities have a much better track record over the past centuries of promoting tolerance than some of the currently fashionable intellectual movements. In the end, we need to understand that reconstruction takes time. This doesn't mean we should be infinitely patient with reconstruction efforts that take too long, and I've been complaining about the elevator and some other missing features on the 5th floor. In the end, but we need to understand that it takes sustained effort. It requires precision in planning and thought, requires sustained analysis, and cannot be reduced to a set of sound bites. It entails humble and careful listening to others. It requires building of networks, and we hope that's part of what we've been able to do here. It's important also to understand that engaging in reconstructive efforts, we cannot assume that any premise system will do. We need to understand that different communities will have different starting points and need to be free to construct their own worldviews within their own institutions and with sensitivity to their own historical experience. But sometimes as we listen to the beliefs of others, we find our own premises deepened and renewed. That is why authentic reconstruction can go on in a pluralistic world, and we hope some of that has gone on here. Thanks for all you have contributed to yet one more new beginning for us. Thank you.
I'm a little shorter than Professor Durham, but I want to thank him for his vision that led to the beginning of these conferences 25 years ago. And to thank all of you. Judge Aydin, I think you're not the only victim here. I know you've had several rigorous days of meetings, and so I will be brief. But I'm so grateful for each of you, for my opportunity to learn from you while you've been here. I just wanted to share some thoughts on the cover of the program, to share why I picked it and what it means to me. The picture was one that was taken of a woman in a refugee camp by a group of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints called Their Story is Our Story, that identifies with those who are migrants because of our own religious traditions' experience with forced migration. They have a book where they've been documenting the stories, giving voice to the voiceless of those who face persecution. I love one statement that was made about these refugees by one of my own religious leaders that I believe applies with equal force to those suffering religious persecution. He was speaking of refugees, but you can take a little liberty and translate the word refugee into victim of persecution. He says, being a refugee may be a defining moment in the lives of those who are refugees, but being a refugee does not define them. Like countless thousands before them, this will be a period, we hope a short period, in their lives. Some of them will go on to be Nobel laureates, public servants, physicians, scientists, musicians, artists, religious leaders, and contributors in other fields. Indeed, many of them were these things before they lost everything. This moment does not define them, but our response will help define us. I love that phrase, our response will help define us. I think that sums up what we've been trying to deal with here, our response to the persecution we see of others throughout the world. How will we let that define us? We've heard so much of the challenges, of the courage, and the need for articulate defenders of those facing persecution. I've been particularly moved by so many of you who have clearly been defined by their response to persecution. And I appreciate those of you who had the courage and humility and example for me of being willing to admit failings in their own communities, because certainly this is a challenge for all of us. And it's interesting, academics who study the quality of empathy from an academic perspective have documented that concern for others, which is one of the aspects of empathy, they define as an inner motivation that moves people to respond and express the urge to care about another person's welfare. That this is deeply influenced by the environment. We have more concern for those in need who resemble us. We have more concern for the suffering we encounter in one person than the suffering in many. We feel less concern if we feel that others deserve to suffer. We feel less concern if we have think we have a higher sense of social status. And I think probably all of those cover all of us. We're all guilty of this. I love two of my heroes, Václav Havel, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Havel wrote in The Power of the Powerless of how the worlds of the powerful and those of the powerless are never divided by a sharp line. Everyone has a small part of both, part of himself in both. Solzhenitsyn similarly wrote, "The line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart." I started by explaining why I was picking this picture, and I hadn't quite gotten there yet. So I'm going to conclude and let you get on with your evening, but by finishing by explaining what this means to me. The picture, when I saw it, immediately spoke to me. You've heard from my colleague, Professor Brett Scharffs, and you've seen the brochure on human dignity, of those amazing and powerful, moving photos of faces, of eyes, that reach out and engage you. And you see these people and feel something about them. Well, after I was thinking about this, I realized why this photo spoke to me. You don't see the woman's face. We don't see her. She's depersonalized. She's abstracted. She's not valued. She's not seen as a human being. To me, it's a powerful image of persecution. You see, she has a headscarf. Presumably, she's Muslim. African-American writer Toni Morrison once spoke in an interview about children, but I love this phrase, and to me, it speaks to how we should and could respond to everyone, not just children. She says, when a kid or child walks in a room, your child or anybody else's, does your face light up? That's what they're looking for. Let your face speak what's in your heart. It's just as small as that. By seeing people, by having our face light up when we see them, we speak what's in our hearts. We see them, we see their challenges, especially when they're not from our own religious tradition, when they're not from our own class or social status, when they're not from our own culture. When we see them and have our faces light up, we speak what's in our hearts. Harvard psychologist Dr. Susan David commented about the Zulu greeting Sawubona, which I believe, but Professor Masomo can correct me if I'm wrong, I hope, means I see you. Isn't that a wonderful greeting? I want to see others. To me, this is what human dignity is, to see every individual around us and their value. I have a practice in my family of praying with my children every night. And I often mention in prayers individuals, family members, neighbors, friends who are struggling with one issue or another. Or myself when I feel like I'm particularly struggling. But my son asked me one night, he said, "Mom, why are you just praying for people you know? Aren't the people you don't know suffering also?" We all have difficulties in our lives. For some people, these are enormous. They're overwhelming. They're life-threatening persecution based on freedom of religion and belief or other issues. The people who matter are not just the people of my religion, of my neighbors, of my friends. I am an American. I'm an Anglo-Saxon. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm a Christian. And it's easy, and I know in the past at times I have not seen people who aren't Americans, or not white, or who are not members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or who are not Christian. And for that, I apologize and ask forgiveness. But my hope is that each of us can do better, that I can do better, that we can relate to everyone we meet, and that we can see them and greet them. Sawubona, I see you. Thank you.
Thank you all. We look forward to seeing you at dinner at 6:30.